everybody. Glad you've joined us on this viewing of our series, Questions and Conversations. My name is Joel Pankos, one of the directors of the Gator Wesley Foundation. You're about to watch a conversation I had with Reverend Latricia Scriven. Latricia had a painting commissioned for her about this image she had of Jesus in her mind, and a group of students asked this painting to be made, and it just captured exactly what she was hoping for. I hope this conversation about how we imagine Jesus and how that affects our faith and how that affects the way that we treat other people is helpful in your faith journey and your faith walk. If you are not part of a small group community and you're one of our students and you'd like to join us, please go to gatorwesley.life, fill out a card there on the page, and one of our staff will be more than happy to get you involved in a small group this summer. If you have questions about the conversation or you have input into the dialogue and you want to do that on the comments below this post, please know that we're here and we're reading those, and we would love to respond to you like that. I hope you enjoy the conversation, and I hope it is helpful on your faith journey this summer.
I want to introduce you guys to a friend of mine, Reverend Latricia Scriven. She is a pastor and a Wesley Foundation director, and I'm going to let her just give a couple of seconds of her own introduction so that we can get to know her.
Okay. Yep. I am Latricia Scriven. I am the mother of 3 children, not including my extended children with FAMU Wesley. I am the wife of one amazing person. I'm from Louisiana. I currently am a pastor at New Life United Methodist Church in Tallahassee and of the Wesley Foundation at Florida A&M University. Happy to be here, Joel.
We're so glad you're with us and hanging out with us. I always like introducing our community to fun people and people that have an amazing heart, and I've appreciated our friendship. So today's message, and if you're clicking on and you're logging into this conversation, you may have heard or had some questions about it, but I'm going to let Latricia introduce you to a friend of hers. And the question is simply, who is Laughing Black Jesus?
Laughing Black. Okay, look, Joel. So first, let me tell you, this is Laughing Black Jesus. Who is he? So several years ago, I don't even remember when exactly, I saw this photo of a Jesus, it seemed to be a Jesus person who was laughing. And in my mind, I just conceived of this laughing Black Jesus. And he lived in my head for many, many years. I would tell all of my students about him at the Wesley Foundation. And in my mind, I had plans of getting someone to paint him one day. I just kind of never did. But they've heard me talk about him so much that last year, actually, for Pastor's Appreciation Month, my students got someone to paint him for me. And the amazing thing is he's just like I imagined in my mind. Like, it was important to me that he have a crown of thorns, and he does, because I didn't want him to just look like a random Black dude. I wanted him to be clear that he was like Laughing Black Jesus. So he is the Jesus that lived in my mind.
Yeah. And why did that picture come into your mind, Latricia?
So I have always thought it great to imagine a Jesus that looked more like me and represented people that I knew, and all of those things, because the images that we see are blonde hair, blue eyes. And to be very honest, I had seen a special, and I don't remember what it was, where somebody went into the community and they were visiting churches, talking about Jesus, talking to people, and there were those who felt a disconnect from the picture that we saw. I remembered growing up and watching Good Times, and season 1, episode 2, we have Michael who is talking about Black Jesus, who we learn later, JJ, painted somebody else, but Black Jesus and all the theology that surrounded it, and how his mom had a rough time with it because she said the first Jesus I knew was this one. And she pointed to the wall, and it was blonde hair, blue-eyed Jesus. And so, yeah, I can't say exactly why, Joel, but it was important for so many reasons to have an image that represented me.
A representative. That's and you know, one of the questions that I always had in my mind when you first introduced me was why the laughter? Why was that so important?
Okay, so first of all, those who know me know that I love to laugh. And one of the things that I say is that the joy of the Lord really is my strength. I think laughter is my superpower. And it allows me to get through not only great times, but times that are painful. And so there's so many things that can be taken away, but my joy is not one of them. And so laughter was just natural to me because it represents who I am, what I love to do, and that's why. And so I imagine Jesus as having a great sense of humor. I mean, like, he had to, because he dealt with all these people, right? I'm sure there were a whole lot of funny moments. And yeah, that's why. That's why.
And I hope he still does have a good sense of humor for all of
He
them.
must, because I am like created in that divine image and I love to laugh. So surely Jesus is laughing.
I love one of the greatest gifts that you have, you're saying, is your laughter. And that's how you see Jesus. I think that has such a beautiful telling of how maybe all of us should look into how we see Jesus. Tell me this.
And I'll add, Joel, I know you're about to ask a question. So I'll add, what was also important for me was the crown of thorns, because laughter does not mean the absence of pain, right? Joy does not always mean that every single thing in life is going okay, but it is what allows us to live in the both and. So Jesus is going through with a crown of thorns and he still has joy. And to me, that's so reflective of our journeys individually, our journeys collectively, certainly as the Black people in America, our journeys where people sometimes have placed a crown of thorns on our heads, but that does not mean that we cannot find joy and the spark in life that allows us to still have our strength. Yeah.
I have goosebumps. I'm sorry. You mentioned that you may have a story or two about how folks have received. Is it okay that I say LBJ?
Yes.
Your favorite acronym. That have received Laughing Black Jesus. Can you share one of those stories with me of connection?
Yeah, sure. So I call him, just for short sometimes, LBJ, not LeBron James, not Lyndon Baines Johnson. He is the real LBJ. Okay, but one of the stories that I'm particularly fond of is one of my dear friends who does not look like me. She's a white female, has a son who is Asian. And she had the image after a meeting that we had. She had the canvas, and I said, just bring it home. I'll get it from you later. And when she brought it to her house, her son saw it. And so he began to ask questions. And she said, well, from what we know about life and biology and all of these things, Jesus probably was a person of color. And he said, well, mommy, or had darker skin. And he said, mommy, why are all of the pictures blonde hair, blue eyes? And so they got into a discussion about that. And at the end of the discussion, he said, I want an Asian Jesus. I want a Jesus that looks like me. And I love that story because it speaks to the need to have multiple representations of divinity. Because how we view the divine often is how we see ourselves. And when we can see divinity reflected in diverse ways, then we can see divinity represented in multiple people and perspectives. And I think those would be the things that would allow us to throw off some of the isms is when we can embrace a divine, a Jesus, right, that reflects who we are.
It's not just the laughter that reflects them from your personality. It's the look, it's the feel, it's how we, I love how you put how we see the divine affects how we see ourselves and how we see others. Which is a great segue to this question. How does our personal image of Jesus then influence or interact with how we understand and live out our faith? How do we take this image that we may have, and how does it affect then the way that we live out, or how do we interact? How does it affect the way that we interact with other people?
Yeah, it's interesting because as you're aware, recently we had the killing murder of another unarmed African-American male. And it's interesting to me, I wonder if we had this image of Jesus, right? If that person represented divinity walking down the street, how quickly we would be afraid and others. I believe that our images feed into sexism and racism and patriarchy, and it makes it so much more difficult to embrace others. And so we turn to fear. Instead of turning to wonder and wondering about other people, we turn to fear. We don't know why we're afraid of the person walking down the street. I just am, right? And I think that it will allow us to live out our faith because more images give us a greater capacity for embracing otherness. I was just talking to my mom recently, who shared one of my sermons with one of her friends. And he said to her, however, in 2020, that he wasn't going to listen because he didn't believe in women pastors or preachers, right? And I get it. I've been there. I know that. And so what if the divine was represented in gender neutral terms? What if we refer to God, as I sometimes do, as she, her, and hers, right? How would that not only change how I see myself, but how I view other people? Yeah.
That's so powerful. Someone even gave me the idea that we should look to someone as in handing out communion. We should look to someone and say, "Am I willing to share the body and blood of Christ?" And
with you.
And I never thought to put on that layer of how I view Christ and how that person views Christ may be different. And
right.
Maybe even to think, what do you think may be important about me sharing who I think Christ is, or my visions or imagination of who Christ is, and you sharing yours? How does that conversation enrich our understanding of each other as well as our understanding of the divine?
Yeah, I think so. I believe that all of theology is contextual, right? How we read scripture, we read it through our lens, through our context, and it affects everything. And so when we begin to share together, this is what I see. Oh, this is what I see. Then we can come up with and co-create with God these narratives that aren't so closed, but become more open so that so many other people can find themselves in it and begin to embrace it. Right? It gives me great joy to talk to friends when we go through actually Bible stories and they say, well, this is what I see. And I say, well, let me tell you how I see it through my lens. And that's one of the things that LBJ, Laughing Black Jesus, allows me to do. And even, you bring up communion, even around the table, I was able to remind a group at the church of, especially during Black History Month, of the bodies innocently who have been sacrificed that we might have life. When we look at the history of slavery in America and other, heinous crimes against entire groups, how have other people shed blood, right? So that we can live a better life today. I think those kinds of conversations just open us up. And the thing about Laughing Black Jesus, culturally for me, or maybe personally for me, it says that Jesus is not laughing just because things are funny, right? Some things are not funny, Joel, but I laugh to keep from crying. Yeah. Tears are okay, and they're needful and they're cleansing. And sometimes I just laugh because the pain is so great. The only thing my mind will do is laugh. Or sometimes, that laugh when you throw your head back like you do not want me to go there. Sometimes I laugh to keep me out of trouble, right? From harming somebody, Joel. It's not that it's funny. I just have to laugh. And so I believe that when we begin to share our stories, we become more connected. And when we can share our stories in ways that don't point to you're right and I'm wrong, but how can we live how can we live in the both andness? I believe we'll be a step closer to creating a better world. I really do.
I love how you even reference LBJ as a catalyst to conversation, and how it opens up. It's possible to open up conversation as we begin to reimagine. I've been reading a lot of Peter Enns lately about this idea of reimagining the divine and re-understanding in our new context and learning from other people's context. There's such beauty and wealth in that conversation.
Yeah.
I had some questions.
Sometimes, go ahead.
No, after you. Go right.
Well, sometimes I have gone back and I reimagine parables and scripture stories, right, with LBJ in mind.
Oh, wow.
Like I have thought about Jesus after he's, feeding the multitudes and he goes up for a break and the disciples are in the boat and the storm comes and they're scared and, he comes out walking on water, right? Imagine Laughing Black Jesus moonwalking across the water. And Peter saying, Lord, bid me to come. Like, that looks cool. And it probably helps that for those who understand Enneagrams, I'm an Enneagram 7. And so when I can reimagine things with laughter and joy, it doesn't take the seriousness away from it. It just gives me an opportunity to reimagine, to reconstruct my own reality. We co-create.
Wow. Yeah. Let that one
imagine being with the disciples and being in the garden. And it's Laughing Black Jesus who is saying, couldn't you just stay awake for just a little while? Like, what I'm about to go through is serious. I know you don't understand everything that's about to happen, but what if we reimagined some of the parables and places and spaces with a different kind of Jesus? I would just challenge people that are watching to just go back and read with him in mind. And then not just with him in mind, but put somebody else in that place, right? A different image of what divinity looks like. And how does that change the narrative? How does that add to the narrative? How does it enhance the words that are coming off of the page? And then go outside and engage with other people, right? Right now, I'm sitting at the church and I picked this corner because that's the original and I wanted him behind me. And right outside, Tony, one of our community people that's experiencing homelessness, he's sitting right outside the church, right? What happens when I sit down, which is what I was doing before this, sit down on the ground and talk to him. And I imagine divinity in Tony, the person that doesn't have a place really to lay his head and is looking for somebody to be generous that we might overlook because he's on a mat. And we may not be thinking about how he reflects the divine. What if I took Tony as my image of who Jesus is? What if I did like the Shack, right? And imagine God as a Black woman. What? Which you know I do, right? All the time, because she is in me. But yeah, so that's why I think it's
the powerful, in that movie alone, the powerful images of a Native American Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Combined with
yes.
A Black woman as
Yes.
the father, and then to see even the father changed.
Yes.
To adapt to the person who needed to see something.
Yes.
And
so what happens when what I need to see and the way that I need to engage divinity is not what's shown? I remember, and this is a true story before Laughing Black Jesus, but I was engaging with a group, it was a couple of college women. And I said, if you could imagine that God was female, what would you think about God? And both of them said, I don't know if I would see God as powerful as God is. I don't know if I would think God was as great. I was horrified, but I know that that's a reflection of all of the isms. And so I changed the question. I said, what if we could prove that God was female, as if God has gender, but what if we could prove that God is female? How would that change how you see yourself? And one of the girls immediately said, oh my gosh, I would think I could do anything. I would see myself as so amazing. All I did was ask a simple question about God and how we see God. And that just really shows that there's a connection. How we see God is directly related to how we see ourselves. One of my favorite quotes came from For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Was Enough. And at the end of that choreo poem, the ladies said together, I found God in myself and I loved her fiercely. I found God in myself and I loved her fiercely. For me, Laughing Black Jesus is finding God in myself and loving her fiercely, right? Smiling woman goddess is finding God in myself and loving her fiercely. I love switching up my image of the divine because it is what allows me to see divinity in everybody that I meet.
You, for the most part, have answered this question that we are trying to capture with each of our interviews this summer as we do this. And that question is simply, why does this conversation matter? There might be a few folks that are like, that didn't catch it already. I've already formulated, man, for me, the conversation, it leads so much more than a picture. But you've taken it to a direction of our understanding of even the conversation of what the divine is. But why do you think this conversation matters so much to a college student, to a person, a human individual?
Yeah. This conversation matters because we matter. And so often I believe that we really do not engage people and each other as if we really matter. we would engage the world differently beyond race and culture and language and, geographical location, sexual orientation, beyond all of those things, if we were able to see the divine in all things, and not just human beings, right? But all of creation. Imagine the real overflowing love that could take place. When I see myself as fully human and fully divine, and I see you as fully human and fully divine, which I really think is one of the greatest lessons of Jesus that we can adapt for ourselves. I don't want to get in theological trouble, but that's what I think. And when we could see the sacredness in all people, no matter what, that is when transformation occurs. It's already happening, right? Transformation occurs all the time, but sometimes I just want to speed it up a little bit. One of the songs that's important in my context is "We Shall Overcome One Day." And I'm like, but when will we overcome? When can we sing "We Overcame"? And I know it's, happening as it has happened and is happening, and all of those things together, because time doesn't have a beginning and an end and all of that. However, what if we could just speed it up? And I believe that happens when we understand the sacred worth of all people. And when Laughing Black Jesus makes us pause, he makes us pause because there's a recognition that he's different. Something else is going on. The person that conceived of him had something else in mind. And so hopefully when people pause at Laughing Black Jesus or female God or, Asian Holy Spirit or, any Native American Holy Spirit, any of those things, it'll make us check our biases. It'll make us help us to become better people. And that's what makes the world a better place. Mm-hmm. Theology doesn't happen in a vacuum. Theology happens contextually, and that happens through our own lens. It matters because we matter.
I love the expression of this being done through conversation. Because yes. I can't find any of this out about you and your impression unless I'm asking you questions.
That's right.
You can't find out about my impression unless you're asking me. And we have to begin to have, I think, better conversations about how we see God interacting with us in the world.
Right. Yeah. And really, I mean, when we think of what the Bible is in a lot of ways, it's groups of people and how they understood God, how God interacted with them, writing these stories down. And I can imagine that if I were writing the narrative, my story might be a little different, right? There are things that I encounter all the time theologically. I won't go in. That'll be another conversation for another day, Joel.
I can wait for it.
Oh, but when I encounter them, the narrative would have been written differently.
Yeah.
And it's important to be able to say that and to be heard and for us to hear it through other people's perspectives so that we can all be free.
And we get to write the narrative. We're part of it. You said it. We're part of it. Oh my gosh.
Laughing Black Jesus is part of the narrative. And I hope that one day when people write the narrative about me, they'll be like, Laughing Black Jesus was her dude.
Well, thank you so much, Latricia, for taking some time to talk with me and us and whoever will interact with this video in this conversation. It has enriched me.
Yes.
This is a question that if someone wants a print or a copy of LBJ, is that something?
Is that a thing? It's a thing.
It's a thing? You want to share with us what that thing is and how we can participate?
Yeah, actually, just shoot me an email, Impact FAMU, IMPACT FAMU, FAMU @gmail.com. It's interesting that you ask me that question, Joel, because once I had the original, and that is the original, I was just like, the whole world needs Laughing Black Jesus. And we had actually decided before COVID didn't want us to be great, to use it as a fundraiser for a campus ministry. And so that's what I actually got. This is a canvas print of them to sell. And so we have them in two sizes, big and a smaller version. So yeah.
Well, they will email you. I know Gator Wesley probably will be emailing you to grab a copy as well to hang in our new building.
This is the time that I need a whole website, and I needed it to actually be a thing, and I could say, just go on and order one now, today, for the small fee of.
We got it. Well, thank you so much, Latricia. And I've just appreciated our friendship, and look forward to hearing this conversation keep going.
Thank you for inviting me, Joel. This has been such a pleasure. I appreciate you.